This just in, YouTube. The Pope has had enough. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. And this week we'll start with this article about the Pope. It looks like on the upcoming World Peace Day, which is on September 21st, the Pope is going to make a statement versus AI. And while as far as I've seen, the Vatican has remained relatively quiet about the bomber jacket posts with the Pope, which a lot of people heard about. The quote here talks about the remarkable advances made in the field of artificial intelligence, but will rain holy fire on the rapidly increasing impact on human activity, social life, politics, and the economy. So yeah, to recap, the statement hasn't been made yet, but we know what he's going to say, and this is going to be on September 21st. The article goes on to talk about responsible use, it talks about maintaining a person's dignity, and it even mentions the story that we covered here where there was a church service in Germany, and that service was put together not just using ChatGPT, but a number of different AI-based technologies put together. It had like an avatar and everything. As I finish on this story in this article for today, I was really kind of reflecting on this is the only religion that I've seen really make any kind of statement on AI one way or another, I believe. Now that said, I haven't really been specifically looking for that, so if I am incorrect on that, please correct me in the comments below. But just like most things, we'll cover this story as it happens in late September. And the other piece of world news that I have for you today is yet another strike in the ongoing Cold War, so to speak, between China and the United States in regards to AI and technology in general. If you're new to the channel or the topic, there's a bit of an arms race going on between AI companies and AI countries, essentially. AI is incredibly powerful for both weaponry and cryptography and really just everything. So the United States naturally doesn't want anyone else to have an edge in that regard, and China being the closest competitor, they've put a number of restrictions in place already on semiconductors and chips. As we take a look at these new laws and regulations, what this is appearing to do is stopping Americans from investing in companies that would benefit China in that regard. And interestingly enough, the executive order here specifically points out the things that I was bringing up as far as cryptography, as far as weaponry, which is one of the few statements that I've seen from the United States that talks about those topics in regards to AI. As you've noticed, most of those topics have been kind of geared towards privacy or regulation or security concerns and things like that, but never really voiced in this way. Moving into a little bit of a lighter topic, Google and record labels are apparently working together. Now, unfortunately, when I hear that headline, my first thought isn't, oh good, they're working to protect the rights of musicians. My guess is both industries are affected very much by AI, by deepfakes, by the music industry and the changes that are going to take place with AI, and they're really looking out more for their bottom line than things like the artists. So this article goes on to cover how the Universal Music Group is essentially working to try to monetize AI music. The quote here says, an artist's voice is often the most valuable part of their livelihood and public persona, and to steal it, no matter what the means, is wrong. Which is an incredibly ironic statement from a company that has ownership rights of somebody else's voice. Now, when it comes to AI music itself, you probably have your own opinions on that. I'm not here to influence that. I will say that even artists have had mixed opinions. They point out here that Drake in April called it the final straw, and Ice Cube called it demonic. While Grimes, on the other hand, is basically like, yeah, make AI-generated music, give me half. Now, of course, as for myself, I don't have a specific opinion on this. This is one of the many industries that's being affected by machine learning-based AI. We've got the same stuff going on in AI art every day, lots of lawsuits and oars in the water there. I just covered a story earlier this week where a bunch of authors swarmed a website and basically forced it to shut down for something real similar to this. The difference here, and the thing I have more of a problem with, is Universal Music Group are basically like vampires. They're not musicians, and they're certainly not protecting art or furthering the interests of music. It's really just about money for all of these demons. But as we flip topics and start talking about some updates to stories that we've talked about previously, let's go back into LK99, which is the superconductor, or the proposed room temperature superconductor we spoke about last week. Now, as I mentioned last week, I was optimistically hopeful that this could exist. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's the case as far as I've seen. We've seen lots of videos like this where they're showing off what's called diamagnetic levitation. But unfortunately, every test that I've seen in regards to resistance, which is the important thing when it comes to superconductors, unfortunately, that's a failure. There have been a lot of theories that have come out as a result of this on how to reach room temperature superconductivity. So maybe this was a great step in the right direction. It's possible that this wasn't a complete waste of time. This was a really exciting moment for the world of science, and had this really panned out, this would have been life-changing for a lot of people. But yeah, long and short of this update is there are some ongoing experiments. There's still some work being done with this compound that I've seen. But based on everything I've seen at this moment, it doesn't really seem possible to create a room temperature superconductor with LK99. as it stands. And after a couple of pieces of bad news in a row, I've got some great news for you. If you haven't pulled the trigger yet to pay the $20 a month, one of the more powerful features is now available for everyone. Custom instructions, just as a reminder, give you a little box that you can kind of fill out. And what it seems to do, at least in practice, is sort of provide super context, which is like really heavily weighted, contextually important stuff that kind of disappears and it just fades into the background. So if you want to tell GPT, I prefer just to get really short answers, or please stop telling me that you're an AI language model, those types of things you can do with custom instructions. And they just get saved in there, and that becomes part of your account or whatever. So if you have certain prompts that you tend to use over and over again that you have copied and pasted or something along those lines, this can circumvent that as well. As it stands the way that I've seen it, you only get the one set of custom instructions, but I could easily see a world where you've got maybe multiple different profiles that you could build or something like that. It's a really cool idea that certainly has some room for growth. But given that you can try it out, and you can try it out now for free, I'd suggest you give it a shot. I saw a couple stories about Zoom this week, and the funniest one, of course, was that they were trying to get everyone to return to the office, being that they are Zoom as a company. But the other piece of news that came out is that apparently they had a policy change, that it looked like it took place sometime in March, and people were really upset when they found out that their data was being used to train AI. The article says that the terms of service changes appeared to grant the company sweeping control over customer data for AI training purposes. When people got upset, they tried a blog post that basically said, whoa, we're not going to do what you think we're going to do with that. But that obviously wasn't good enough for the people. And in the newest piece of news, and what this covers today, is that Zoom has completely reversed that policy now. It's no longer part of their terms of service. So this is, I guess, a win. I'm not really certain what this data was being used for. I'm not just going to look at every data scraping victory as a win, because honestly, in most cases, it's not. But at the same time, I'm certainly not on team corporations stealing from people who don't even know it. We live in a much more complicated world nowadays, where ownership and privacy and intellectual property are all very different than they were even just 2 or 3 years ago. And it feels like, and I'm not really sure how it's going to ultimately pan out, but it certainly feels like things will eventually have to change in some regard. It's just hard to say how and when. In the world of large language models, we had some updates where Anthropic has launched a smaller version of Claude. And well, not necessarily smaller, it's just called Claude Instant. It's through an API, and it uses Claude 2, which is the language model that we talked about earlier that has a lot more context than even GPT-4. If I recall, I think it was 100,000 tokens or something like that. And I don't know if the experience is exactly the same. I don't know if you can upload files through the API, for example, but if so, Claude Instant and Claude 2 sounds like it would be extremely impressive. In the world of large language models that are actually competing against each other in these giant corporations, Bard has been in the fight, but really not on the same level as GPT-4. Whereas Claude 2, at least in my experience with it, has felt much more similar to what you kind of expect with GPT-4. They just feel like they've got kind of a similar vibe. And whether or not you decide to personally use Claude or make it your main driver, it's important that it exists. It's actually really important that there's a lot of different options out there, because we want to make sure that there is competition and that all of this data is not really just being honed through one source. But switching gears a little bit to a fun story, I did come across something that I wanted to share this week about an AI-powered grocery bot. Now, this tool can take a list of whatever ingredients you give it, and it uses its contextual genius to give you a recipe that utilizes all of those ingredients. So you tell it you've got Oreos and milk and cucumbers, and it will figure out some kind of disgusting recipe. It seems like this particular person put a number of household cleansers in as their ingredients, and toxic gas was apparently one of the resulting recipes. As I show you the examples of the recipes on the screen, I shouldn't have to remind anybody to not make any of this stuff at home, because most of these are jokes. As you can see, with just bread, water, and some basic ant traps, you can make ant jelly delight, or a poisoned bread sandwich. Alright, so the real question for you is this tool dangerous, or are people just ridiculous with the types of recipe ingredients that they're giving it? I mean, they're clearly trying to break this tool, so we really can't fault the tool, right? I can kind of picture the frustration of the developers putting together something that does work as intended, but the problem is the users. The problem is that users will purposely try to use it in unintended ways to specifically make it break, and it creates a lot of additional work that really didn't need to exist. So while it's a fun story and a fun topic, it's just like large language models, where every week we're seeing people like designing crazy viruses or specifically trying to use the technology in the worst ways possible. And with all the fears surrounding AI, it really just doesn't seem like the AI is the problem in a lot of cases, you know what I mean? But talking about an AI that could be a problem, here is one that will freak you out. So AI researchers have now claimed that they've got a tool that can listen to keystrokes and tell you what's being typed with a 93 to 95% accuracy. And they can do this just listening to a Zoom call or listening to a stream or something along those lines. And this is somehow concurrently one of the best and worst ideas I've ever seen, because now it exists, you know? It's something that you can't put that genie back in the bottle, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. This is something that can only move up from here. And unfortunately, the paper suggests a few defenses, and those defenses are change your typing style, use randomized passwords. What's interesting about an attack like this, or a hack, or I don't know what you would really call it, it really changes cybersecurity in ways that you couldn't have imagined. Who'd have ever thought that the cadence at which you type would matter, or that might become a security threat, for example? You know, it's not that I want to stick my eye on a WorldCoin orb or anything like that, but I'm starting to see the necessity for something a little bit more than passwords in this future that we're building. Between this and the reality of quantum computers and the cryptography breaking that's going to happen as a result of that, the internet is feeling a little bit less secure nowadays, huh? Alright, switching gears completely though, in another area of new technology, so I wanted to talk about a development from Stable Diffusion. So Stability AI has now announced stable code. They haven't released anything yet that I've seen, but this is going to be a language model that really is specific to coding, so something like Replit or StarCoder. Now, GPT-4 has had the code interpreter available to Plus users for a little while now. That specializes a little bit better in Python, but I've been able to use it for things like C#. Now, on the other hand, stable code looks like it's trained on Python, Go, Java, JavaScript, C, Markdown, and C++. Which, and I'll say this, there's a lot of competition specifically in this area of the industry. Microsoft has Copilot, which is something that's part of GitHub, but also something that they're integrating directly into Windows. Amazon's got their own thing going. And speaking about Google and Bard and Palm 2, which is really the language model behind Bard, I wanted to really link this more than talk about it because there's a lot of technical stuff here, but it really just shows you some of the advances that Google has made with really understanding documents that are uploaded into the system. You know, even 20 years ago when we were dealing with optical character recognition and flatbed scanners and things like that, we had what felt like magical technology. But with machine learning powered AI, as we move forward into a future where computers can really understand just about any type of file, break it down, take apart the context, you can see in some of the examples here how the computer just seems to have a better understanding of what it's looking at and how to understand it. To make a little bit more sense out of what I'm saying here, I'm just looking towards a future where you can not just chat with your large language model, you can actually upload any file on your computer, any project that you're working on, and the computer will just have a better understanding of what it's looking at and how to help. We're seeing a lot of incremental changes happen to our modern internet day by day. Some of them are very obvious, and some of them kind of fly beneath the radar. One of the things that I just saw here is Google Search now has an AI-powered grammar checker. If you're curious about how this works, this is directly in the search functionality of Google. You just type grammar check or check grammar, and apparently it just does that now with AI-powered tools. But the last thing that I'm going to cover today, and it looks like a big one, is called IDX, which is a new Google project, and it looks like a browser-based development environment that's AI-enabled. So we were just talking about stable code and Replit and Copilot and all those things that are competing, and this is yet another big name that's obviously going to make a bit of a splash. Now, one of the reasons I could foresee this being a big deal is, of course, Android and the different apps that could be developed with AI-powered tools for the Android platform specifically. As much as Apple has been more recently embracing AI and mostly internally, I'm not sure that they've given those AI-powered tools to the developers to design specifically for iOS or anything like that, whereas it looks like Android is probably going to get a little bit of a leap there. But the other big differences in this service is it looks like this focuses more on full stack development, which is very different from what Copilot is doing or even Amazon. And while I myself don't have a lot of experience yet with a cloud-based development environment, if it's all-inclusive and it's very easy and it works like it says it does, this seems like it might be a huge come-up for a lot of developers, big and small. So I'll leave you on that note. It's not all bad news this week. We've had a mixed bag of a lot of different stuff going on. I really appreciate those of you who made it to the end of the video, especially if you were able to interact, comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I'll keep an eye out, of course, if anything big happens this week, but if not, I'll see you next Friday for another AI news, drama, and updates. Thanks for watching.